I'd like to share with you today a reading from the chapter Pure Love from Thomas Merton's New Seeds of Contemplation for the purpose of presenting to you a parallel experience to that of higher consciousness. So go beyond any language that might seem foreign to you, though very little is there, but the devotional, religious, classical expression of certain things, which are minimal because this is experiential. And see for yourself how you can connect this man's expression of something numinous and inexpressible, and yet which is what we can experience in higher states of self-remembering, of the third state of consciousness, of liberation from identification, expanded awareness, entering the present moment, higher self. Don't let the vocabulary mask the commonality of a rare experience on the summit of our humanity, of our potential as living creatures in space-time to experience something of the infinite, something of the cosmic, authentic, mystical awareness. What is spoken of here is the highest form of conscious experience, one that goes beyond systems and teachings and theories and practices. And so references to this word God, however packed with misunderstandings it may be, or negative associations, don't let that get in the way of what this is trying to say to you. This is the summit of conscious awakening, of union, communion with higher reality, of experience of spirit coming through us because we have opened ourselves so fully. These teachings that we study here allow us to prepare, to climb some steps, to make adjustments, to cleanse that cup in order to receive, to recognize the higher from the lower. But ultimately, nothing prepares us for what truly is possible for us. Therefore, I urge you to hear this beyond any prejudices of language or tradition, without letting it be narrowed into some particular kind of culturally determined insight on higher reality. Let this be a gift to you from another soul that broke through into the places that we are seeking to enter, seeking to climb up towards, struggling to enable, mysteriously sensing could be possible for us, tasting every once in a while. Here in what is shared with you in this reading is the breakthrough into that greater consciousness, that greater life, that greater identity, which is ours to receive if our hearts will carry us to the top of that mountain. So my hope is that in sharing this with you, it will reinforce, not at an intellectual level, but in your own organic way, name some of that which you have experienced in moments rare and precious, so that you may, for yourself, focus in on that becoming process which enables your living in that kind of elevated space and consciousness, new identity, transformational identity. There where your journey in all its efforts can truly lead you. Our reality, our true self, is hidden in what appears to us to be nothingness and void. What we are not seems to be real. What we are seems to be unreal. We can rise above this unreality and recover our hidden identity. And that is why the way to reality is the way of humility, which brings us to reject the illusory self and accept the empty self that is nothing in our own eyes and in the eyes of society, but is our true reality in the eyes of God. For this reality is in God and with God and belongs entirely to Him. Yet of course it is ontologically distinct from Him and in no sense part of the divine nature or absorbed in that nature. This inmost self is beyond the kind of experience which says, I want, I love, I know, I feel. It has its own way of knowing, loving, and experiencing, which is a divine way and not a human one. A way of identity, of union, of espousal, in which there is no longer a separate psychological individuality drawing all good and all truth toward itself, and thus loving and knowing for itself. Lover and beloved are one spirit. Therefore, as long as we experience ourselves in prayer as an I standing on the threshold of the abyss of purity and emptiness that is God, waiting to receive something from Him, we are still far from the most intimate and secret intuitive knowledge that is pure contemplation. From our side of the threshold, this darkness, this emptiness, looks deep and vast and exciting. There's nothing we can do about entering it. We cannot force our way over the edge, although there is no barrier. But the reason is perhaps that there is also no abyss. There you remain, somehow feeling that the next step will be a plunge and you will find yourself flying in interstellar space. When the next step comes, you do not take the step. You do not know the transition. You do not fall into anything. You do not go anywhere. And so you do not know the way by which you got there or the way by which you come back afterward. You are certainly not lost. You do not fly. There is no space, or there is all space. It makes no difference. The next step is not a step. You are not transported from one degree to another. What happens is that the separate entity that is you apparently disappears, and nothing seems to be left but a pure freedom, indistinguishable from infinite freedom. Love identified with love. Not two loves, one waiting for the other, striving for the other, seeking for the other, but love loving in freedom. Would you call this experience? I think you might say that this only becomes an experience in a person's memory. Otherwise, it seems wrong even to speak of it as something that happens, because things that happen have to happen to some subject, and experiences have to be experienced by someone. But here, the subject of any divided or limited or creature experience seems to have vanished. You are not you, you are fruition. If you like, you do not have an experience, you become experience. But that is entirely different, because you no longer exist in such a way that you can reflect on yourself or see yourself having an experience or judge what is going on, if it can be said that something is going on that is not eternal and unchanging, and an activity so tremendous that it is infinitely still. And here all adjectives fall to pieces. Words become stupid. Everything you say is misleading, unless you list every possible experience and say, that is not what it is, that is not what I am talking about. Metaphor has now become hopeless altogether. Talk about darkness if you must, but the thought of darkness is already too dense and too coarse. Anyway, it is no longer darkness. You can speak of emptiness, but that makes you think of floating around in space, and this is nothing spatial. What it is freedom. It is perfect love. It is pure renunciation. It is the fruition of God. It is not freedom in erring in some subject. It is not love as an action dominated by an impulse germane to one's own being. It is not renunciation that plans and executes itself after the manner of a virtue. It is freedom living and circulating in God, who is freedom. It is love loving in love. It is the purity of God rejoicing in His own liberty. And here, where contemplation becomes what it is really meant to be, it is no longer something infused by God into a created subject, so much as God living in God and identifying a created life with His own life, so that there is nothing left of any significance but God living in God. If a person who has thus been vindicated and delivered and fulfilled and destroyed could think and speak at all, it would certainly never be to think and speak of himself as someone separate or as the subject of a grandiose experience. And that is why it does not really make much sense to speak of all this as the high point of a series of degrees, and as something great by comparison with other experiences which are less great. It is outside the limit within which comparisons have meaning. It is beyond the level of ways that correspond to any of our notions of travel, beyond the degrees that correspond to our ideas of progression. Yet this too is a beginning. It is the lowest level in a new order in which all the levels are immeasurable and unthinkable. It is not yet the perfection of the interior life. The most important thing that remains to be said about this perfect contemplation, in which the soul vanishes out of itself by the perfect renunciation of all desires and all things, is that it can have nothing to do with our ideas of greatness and exaltation, and is not therefore something which is subject to the sin of pride. In fact, this perfect contemplation implies by its very essence the perfection of all humility. Pride is incompatible with it in every possible way. It is only something that a man could be proud of or desire inordinately or in some other way make material for sin when it is completely misunderstood and taken for something which it is not and cannot be. For pride, which is the inordinate attribution of goods and values and glories to one's own contingent and exterior self, cannot exist where one is incapable of reflecting on a separate self living apart from God. how can a person be proud of anything when he is no longer able to reflect upon himself or realize himself or know himself? Morally speaking, he is annihilated because the source and agent and term of all his acts is God. And the essence of this contemplation is the pure and eternal joy that is in God because God is God. The serene and interminable exaltation in the truth that he who is perfect is infinitely perfect, is perfection. To think that a person could be proud of this joy once it had discovered him and delivered him would be like saying, this person is proud because the air is free. This other person is proud because the sea is wet. And here is one who is proud because the mountains are high, and the snow on their summits is clean, and the wind blows on the snow and makes a plume of cloud trail away from the high peaks. Here is a man who is dead and buried and gone, and his memory has vanished from the world of human beings, and he no longer exists among the living who wander about in time. And will you call him proud because the sunlight fills the huge arc of sky over the country where he lived and died and was buried back in the days when he existed? So it is with one who has vanished into God by pure contemplation. God alone is left. He is the I who acts there. He is the one who loves and knows and rejoices.